Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I picked concrete work because the money was decent, and I liked working with my hands. Been pouring foundations, footings, and floors for about 15 years when this story happened back in the late 90s. The concrete company I worked for had a solid reputation around town. We did good work, mostly commercial stuff like warehouse foundations and industrial projects. The pay was better than most construction jobs, and even though we put in long hours, nobody really complained. Most of the crew were good people who showed up ready to work every day. Sure, we had a few guys who moved a little slower than the rest, but they pulled their weight and didn't cause problems. The issue was our boss. This guy was something else. He had this idea that the only way to run a crew was by yelling at everyone constantly. I swear I never heard him speak in a normal tone of voice. Everything was shouting, micromanaging, and getting in people's faces about every little thing. If you were mixing concrete and he didn't like how you held the hose, he'd walk over and start screaming. If you were setting forms and took more than 2 minutes to adjust something, here he came with his red face and bulging veins. Most of us had learned to just keep our heads down and do the work. The paycheck made it worth dealing with his attitude, and we all knew he was just one of those bosses who thought intimidation was leadership. We'd complain about him during lunch breaks, but nobody wanted to rock the boat enough to quit a good-paying job. That all changed during this big project we got at the local sawmill. They needed a foundation poured for some massive kiln they were installing. It was a huge job, way bigger than anything our regular crew could handle in the time they wanted it done. So our boss went out and hired about 6 local guys to help us finish on schedule. He paid them the same rate as us regular employees, which was fair enough. More hands meant we could get it done faster. The temporary workers seemed like decent guys. They were eager to work and didn't cause any drama. Most of them had some construction experience, just not specifically with concrete work. We were happy to show them the ropes and get them up to speed. One of the new guys was keen to learn everything properly. He'd ask questions about the right way to do things and genuinely wanted to understand the process. On this day, we were setting up for a big pour when he realized he wasn't sure about one of the techniques we used for finishing the surface. The new guy came over and asked me if I could show him the proper way to float a section of the concrete. I was about to walk over and demonstrate when our boss appeared out of nowhere. The new guy figured since the boss was right there, he might as well ask him directly. The new guy politely asked the boss if he could show him how to handle that part of the job, explaining that he wanted to make sure he got it right. What happened next was like watching someone flip a switch. Our boss went from 0 to completely unhinged in about half a second. He started screaming at the poor guy, asking what he had said and whether he thought the boss had time to hold his hand like some kindergarten teacher. The new guy tried to explain that he just wanted to make sure he was doing it properly, but before he could finish his sentence, our boss grabbed him by the throat and slammed him against the nearest wall. The sound of his back hitting the concrete was sickening. Then, while the poor guy was gasping for air, our boss hauled back and slapped him across the face so hard it echoed across the job site. The force of the slap sent the new guy stumbling backward. He hit the safety railing we had set up around the work area, flipped over it, and fell about 4 feet down to the concrete floor below. He landed hard and just lay there groaning. All of us just stood there in shock. I mean, our boss was a yeller and a micromanager, but we'd never seen him get physical with anyone. The new guy was trying to get up but clearly hurt. Our boss looked around at all of us, staring at him, didn't say a word, and walked straight to his truck. He got in, started it up, and drove off the job site like nothing had happened. Our foreman was the first to snap out of it. He told someone to help him get the injured guy up and said we needed to call for an ambulance. This was before cell phones were common, but our work truck had a 2-way radio with an emergency channel. The foreman called for an ambulance and the police while a couple of us helped the injured guy sit up. He was conscious but definitely hurting. His face was already swelling up where he got slapped, and he was holding his ribs. The ambulance arrived pretty quickly, and our foreman rode with the new guy to the hospital. He also talked to the police officers and gave them his statement about what happened. About an hour later, the foreman called from the hospital. The injured worker had some bad bruising and was sore all over, but nothing was broken. The doctors wanted to keep him overnight for observation just to be safe. That evening, our foreman called each of us at home. He had everyone's phone numbers since he was second in command. He asked us all to meet at Murphy's Pub downtown to talk about what happened and figure out what we were going to do next. Everyone showed up except the guy who got hurt. We figured he was too banged up to make it out, which was understandable. The foreman bought the first round, and we started talking about the situation. Most of us regular employees were ready to just walk away. We'd had enough of our boss's behavior, and seeing him assault someone was the last straw. We figured he'd get what was coming to him through the legal system, and we didn't want to be part of his company anymore. The temporary workers felt differently. They'd been hired to complete this specific job, and now they couldn't finish it because the boss had walked off. They were talking about breach of contract and wanting to get paid for the full job they'd been promised. We were about halfway through our discussion when the injured guy walked into the pub. He was moving slowly and had some nasty bruises on his face, but he wanted to be part of the conversation. The injured guy told us he had just finished talking to the detective handling the case. He said they had arrested our boss about an hour ago and were charging him with assault, causing bodily harm. That sealed the deal for the temporary workers. They all started talking about filing their own legal claims for breach of contract. Our boss had hired them to complete the sawmill job, and now that was impossible. The next morning, we all showed up at the job site at the usual time. Around 8 o'clock, our boss pulled up in his truck. He looked like he hadn't slept and was probably just getting out of jail on bail. He got out of his truck and started walking toward us like it was just another normal day. That's when we put our plan into action. I was the first one to walk up to him. I looked him straight in the eye and told him I was quitting. Then I turned around and walked to my truck. The next guy stepped up and did the same thing, telling the boss he was quitting too. One by one, every single person on that job site walked up to our boss, looked him in the eye, and said those same words. Then we all got in our vehicles and drove away in a line like some kind of parade. Our boss just stood there, watching his entire workforce disappear. The fallout from that day was more severe than any of us expected. The sawmill sued him for breach of contract because they had a deadline to meet and now couldn't finish their project on time. The fines were enormous, and he had to sell off most of his equipment just to pay them. Then came the lawsuits from the temporary workers. Each one of them filed claims for the full amount they'd been promised for the job. The court sided with all of them, and our boss had to pay out every single contract in full. The assault case went even worse for him. The guy he attacked won his civil lawsuit and was awarded a substantial settlement. On the criminal side, our boss got sentenced to almost 5 months in county jail, plus a huge fine he couldn't afford to pay. The judge also ordered him to take a full year of anger management classes and do volunteer work at the local food bank. All of this basically bankrupted him. He lost his business, his equipment, and had to let the bank repossess almost everything he owned. His wife stuck with him through all of it, which surprised everyone. Turns out her family had money, so even though he was broke, she wasn't hurting financially. But here's the thing that really surprised me. About 10 years later, I heard our old boss had started up another concrete company. His in-laws had loaned him the money to get back on his feet. I'm 18 now, but I still deal with stuff from my childhood that makes everyday life harder than it should be. My biological dad wasn't a good person, and the things he did to me when I was little left me with post-traumatic stress disorder. Most days I'm fine, but sometimes something triggers a flashback and I'm suddenly 7 years old again, terrified and helpless. When it happens, I might scream or thrash around, or sometimes I just freeze up and stare at nothing. It's embarrassing and scary, but my family understands. My mom remarried when I was 12, and my stepdad is the best thing that ever happened to our family. He's this gentle giant at 6 feet 7.5 inches tall, while my mom is tiny at 5'3". My younger brother is 5'5", just an inch taller than me at 5'4". These height differences matter for what happened later. This whole mess started on what should have been just a normal shopping trip. School was starting soon, and we were at one of those big stores looking for supplies and maybe some fun stuff too. I was excited because I've been wanting to try customizing dolls as a hobby. I'd seen people online make these amazing artistic pieces out of regular dolls, and I thought it might be something cool to get into. We split up in the store to cover more ground. My stepdad and brother went to check out the foam dart guns. My mom wandered over to look at water guns, and I headed to the doll section to find one with movable joints that would work for customizing. I was scanning the shelves when I found exactly what I was looking for. This doll had all the right articulation points, and I could already picture how I might modify it. Just as I reached for it, someone grabbed my wrist hard. I spun around and saw this woman with her mask hanging off one ear, standing next to a girl I recognized from school. The woman looked angry for no reason I could understand. She told me I was too old for dolls and demanded I put it down. I tried to explain that I was planning to use the doll for customizing, that it was something I wanted to try as a hobby. She didn't even listen to my explanation. Without warning, she yanked the doll right out of my hands and slammed it back onto the shelf. The sharp edge of the plastic packaging caught my hand and cut it, but I quickly pulled my sleeve down to hide the blood. I just wanted to get away from this crazy situation, but the girl from school stepped in front of me, blocking my path. I recognized her now. She was one of those kids who always seemed to think the world owed her everything. She demanded that I give her my mask. I told her no, explaining that it was the only mask I had with me. Before I could react, she reached up and ripped my mask right off my face. The elastic snapped, and her long fingernails scraped down my cheek, leaving a deep, stinging cut. The sudden pain and the aggressive grabbing motion sent me straight into a flashback. Suddenly, I wasn't in the store anymore. I was 7 years old with my biological dad reaching for my head, and I started screaming. Karen must have thought I was just being dramatic because she grabbed me, trying to make me shut up. That's when my stepdad appeared. He'd heard my screams from across the store and came running. He pulled her hands off me, and I curled up against him, shaking and barely aware of what was happening around me. Karen and her daughter started yelling for help, making it sound like they were the victims. Employees and security guards came rushing over, and my mom and brother ran over from where they'd been shopping. One of the guards asked what had happened. The girl accused my stepdad of attacking her mom and demanded they arrest him. Karen was actually on the ground now, wailing about how my stepdad had supposedly broken her leg. It was completely fake. He'd barely touched her, just pulled her hands off me. Another guard came over to ask my family what was going on. My mom tried to explain that it was all a misunderstanding and that my boyfriend hadn't hurt anyone. My brother backed her up, insisting that my stepdad would never do something like that. My stepdad was checking on me, asking if I needed to go outside, but I was still lost in the flashback and could barely respond. The employees and guards were starting to piece together what really happened just by looking at my bloody face and torn mask. They were getting ready to escort Karen and her daughter out when the girl suddenly lunged at me. She grabbed my hair and yanked me down to my knees, which is one of the worst positions for me because of what my biological dad used to do. My family knew how bad this was. The girl had this sick smile on her face like she was enjoying watching me panic. That's when I completely lost it. I let out this blood-curdling scream, not even aware of the real world anymore, just drowning in memories of my biological dad holding my head in that same position. My stepdad pulled me away from her and picked me up, carrying me outside to help me calm down. But here's where things got even more complicated. There were 2 police officers sitting in their car outside, and all they saw was this huge, muscular man carrying a sobbing, terrified teenager. Their first instinct was to assume the worst. They jumped out and tried to arrest my stepdad, which was the last thing we needed. My mom and brother came running out and were able to explain what had actually happened. The officers went back inside to investigate, and after talking to the employees and security guards who had witnessed everything, they came back out with Karen in handcuffs. It turned out the store had cameras that caught the whole thing. They could see Karen grabbing the doll from me, her daughter ripping off my mask and scratching my face, Karen grabbing me when I was having a panic attack, and then her daughter pulling me down by my hair. There was no question about who the real aggressor was. The girl from school got suspended when the school found out about the incident. Karen ended up getting charged with assault on a minor and making false statements to police. My family pressed charges for both the physical assault and for triggering my condition, which the officers said could be considered harassment. The whole thing was terrifying while it was happening, but I'm grateful for how it ended. 4 years ago, I finally saved enough money to buy my own apartment in Lisbon. It wasn't huge, but it was mine, and most importantly, it came with a parking spot in the building's private garage. Anyone who lives in Lisbon knows that parking is an absolute nightmare on the streets, so having my own guaranteed spot was worth its weight in gold. The apartment was on the 3rd floor, and my parking spot was one of the easier ones to access in the garage. Some of the spots were tucked into awkward corners or required tricky maneuvering to get in and out, but mine was right near the entrance with plenty of room to park comfortably. Everything was going great until last year when I got offered an amazing job opportunity in Germany. The pay was incredible, and it was exactly the kind of career move I've been hoping for. The only catch was that I'd need to relocate for at least 6 months, possibly longer. Since I'd be gone for such a long time, I decided to be a good neighbor. I moved my car to my parents' house where they have a big driveway with plenty of space, and I put up a notice in the building's elevator. The notice said I was the owner of apartment 3B and would be away for at least 6 months, and that anyone was welcome to use my parking spot during this time. I thought it was a nice gesture. The parking situation in our neighborhood is terrible, and I figured someone could really benefit from having access to an easy parking spot while I was away. What I thought would be 6 months ended up being almost a full year. The job in Germany was going so well that they extended my contract, and I was making great money, so I stayed longer than originally planned. When I finally decided to come back to Lisbon, I put up another notice in the elevator 2 days before my return. The new notice explained that I was back and would be using my parking spot again starting that week, and thanked whoever had used it while I was away. I picked up my car from my parents and drove to my building, excited to finally park in my own spot again. But when I got to the garage, there was still a car in my space. It was a small blue sedan that I didn't recognize. I figured maybe the person hadn't seen my notice yet, so I parked on the street and decided to give it another day. Street parking in my area is a pain, but I wanted to be reasonable about it. The next day, the same car was still there. Now I was getting annoyed. I asked a couple of my neighbors if they knew who owned the blue sedan. My downstairs neighbor told me that the car belonged to the lady in apartment 5B and that she had been using my spot for months now. I went up to the 5th floor and knocked on the door of apartment 5B. A woman in her 50s answered, and before I could even introduce myself properly, she cut me off and said that if I was there about the parking spot, she wasn't moving her car. I explained that I was the owner of apartment 3B and that it was my parking spot and that I had left a notice saying I was back. She told me that I had said I'd be gone for 6 months, but I was away for almost a year, so she considered that I had abandoned the spot. I tried to explain that wasn't how it worked and that I owned the parking spot because it came with my apartment. She argued that her parking spot was extremely difficult for her to park in because it was in a terrible corner where she could barely fit her car, and that my spot was much easier to use. I told her I understood it might be more convenient, but it was still my spot, and she needed to move her car. She suggested that I should use her spot instead. When I asked where her spot was, she said she couldn't let me use it right now because she was storing some boxes there. She wanted to keep using my easy parking spot because hers was difficult, but I couldn't use her spot because she was using it for storage. I asked her to confirm that she wanted to keep using my spot because hers was inconvenient, but I couldn't use hers because she was storing things there. She said exactly that she had been using my spot for months now and was settled in. I told her that didn't matter because it was still my spot. She said we'd see about that and slammed the door in my face. I went to the building administrator the next day. He's a nice older gentleman who's been managing the building for years. He promised to talk to her and sort everything out. He came back an hour later, shaking his head. He apologized and said she refused to move the car. He explained that she claimed she had as much right to the spot as I did since I was gone for so long. I asked if that was legally true and if I really owned the spot. He confirmed that of course I owned it and that he had told her that, but she wouldn't listen to reason. I decided to try the official route. I sent her a registered letter giving her 48 hours to remove her car from my parking spot. I made sure it was properly addressed and sent through the postal service so there would be a record of delivery. The next day I checked the mailboxes and found my unopened letter sitting in the garbage bin next to them. She had literally thrown it away without reading it. That's when I decided to get creative. I started watching her schedule, learning when she left and came back. Whenever she left, I would quickly park my car in my spot, hoping she'd get the message when she came back and couldn't park there. But she was just as stubborn. She would park behind my car, blocking me in, or find some other way to make things difficult. This went on for several weeks. Then one day, I came down to the garage and found my car with a long, deep scratch running along the entire driver's side. Someone had keyed my car from front to back. I knew it was her. That was the final straw. I called my friend who owns a towing company. We planned everything for a Saturday morning because I'd noticed she never left the building on Saturdays. My friend asked if I was sure I wanted to do this. I told him she had keyed my car, been stealing my parking spot for weeks, and wouldn't listen to reason. I said I was done being nice. He asked where I wanted him to tow it to. I suggested just somewhere nearby where she'd have to walk to get it. We got to the garage early Saturday morning and loaded her car onto the tow truck, but driving away, it didn't feel like enough. She had caused me weeks of stress, forced me to park on the street, ignored official letters, and damaged my property. My friend said this felt too easy and that she'd just drive back and park there again. I asked what he meant. He said we could take it further away and make it a real inconvenience. I asked how far he meant. He said he was joking before, but we could take it to Madrid. Madrid is in Spain, about 600 kilometers away from Lisbon. It was a crazy idea, but the more I thought about it, the more perfect it seemed. I asked if he had time for that. He said he had nothing else planned that day and suggested we do it. So we drove to Madrid. It took about 6 hours, but we had a great time. We stopped for lunch, walked around the city, and waited until evening when the streets were quieter. We found the perfect spot for her car, a handicapped parking space right in front of a police station. My friend removed both license plates from the car. He said this way, even if she figured out where it was, she'd have extra paperwork to deal with. We drove back to Lisbon that night and I finally parked my car in my own parking spot. It's been 2 weeks now and I haven't seen her car since. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.